everyone, and welcome to our next episode of Midnight War. This time it's a Fireside Chat live with esteemed colleagues of mine. I'll let them introduce themselves. Joshua, let's start with you.
Sure. Josh Copeland. I'm one of the cybersecurity directors with AT&T. I have a pretty diverse background in doing everything you can possibly imagine in IT. Was Air Force for 20 years and then went into Fed contracting, and then now doing cybersecurity stuff for AT&T.
And Will.
Hey, awesome. So, Will Klusovsky here. I'm a currently chief cybersecurity architect at Avertium, 23 years in the industry, last 13 or 14 in consulting and managed services. And I got started in the Marine Corps. So Josh and I are allowed to make fun of each other, but nobody else is. Like, that's the rules, right?
Well, I served in the IDF, so maybe I can get on that too. So.
Standing.
Okay,
I
Robert.
spent most of my career, working with CISOs and, helping them solve problems. I've pretty much worked in any department that exists in a security firm, over my 20 some odd years.
And Robert.
My name is Robert Taylor, and I began my career on Tuesday, the 27th. I retired from the culinary industry in January, went back to school, went through a program at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, graduated on November 20th, and had a job about 10 days later. So I'm really just happy to be here with all you vets. And first and foremost, thank you for your service. But I look forward to just listening to you guys tonight because I know I'm going to learn something.
Robert, having grown up in the service industry, you're in a much less harsh environment now.
Oh, yeah, I hope so. I'm looking forward to it more than anything.
So, Joshua, 2022 trends of cybersecurity, what were they?
The big one's obviously ransomware. That's been everywhere, all over the place, largely because you started off with the pipeline issues, and then we've had a couple of hospitals that were ransomware that actually caused a few deaths. Just all the various industries. SMBs are now being targeted more so than, the big whales of, large corporations, because they can figure out that, they'll pay because they don't have the processes and procedures. It's become totally a commercial product where, the ransomware folks have actual help desk with escalation points, and, you can negotiate your ransom down and they'll say, hold on, let me go talk to my manager. It's absolutely insane, but that's kind of like the big trend. And then obviously just all the various breaches that are going on outside of ransomware where, data is getting leaked all over the place. So that's been kind of, 2022 in the nutshell is just breaches and ransoms. But, we're going to see more of that next year, and then some probably different flares on that coming out.
People don't realize that, but hospitals have been targeted with ransomware, and it has caused fatalities. When people talk to me, sometimes they say, hey, so somebody steals my information or gets my computer locked. So what? And I'm like, well, it's bigger than that. It's not just your personal computer. It's systems that we actually need to use, like the power grid, the water treatment systems. What happens if the power goes out? What happens if we don't have water to drink? People need to look at it at a macro level, not just my little laptop is being hijacked.
You're in Texas, so you are deeply familiar with what adverse actions can occur when your grid goes down, as of the Snowmageddon last year. And I know those of us in the Southeast are kind of worried about the same thing coming up this week because we're dropping down to some highly unusual temperatures for the area.
It's amazing how the simplest thing that we use on a day-to-day basis, if you take them away from us, we fall apart. It's like no toilet paper. Seems simple enough, but shortage of toilet paper, what do we do? Hey, Will, 2022 trends for you.
Well, for me, looking at sort of the data and statistics, supply chain, I think, was responsible for 60% of breaches. And I think a lot of the industry is starting to wake up and realize what that means, because it wasn't just manufacturers. So when we think of supply chain, we tend to think of people who produce things and get it to other people, but it's really third-party risk. Third-party risk management, your suppliers, your vendors, your partners you're doing business with. I think the top industries hit with it were financial services and then manufacturing, healthcare. I had a client in a previous life who big, medical organization had 10,000 organizations that they had to work with, right? Between, people who patch and manage all of the devices inside the, MRI machines don't patch themselves, right? Those type of things like that. Your partner's running the HVAC system, the old way, Target got hacked. So that whole idea of supply chain and, your risk is now being, we always talk about your risk being extended beyond the enterprise, but we're really, really seeing that now, like even more heightened. I know, especially in defense industry, that it's a lot easier to hack some SMB, catfish somebody on Facebook to get into Lockheed Martin than it is to go directly at Lockheed Martin, right? So, your weakest links tend to not be within the chain. So I think looking at that right now, I think that to me is very, very important.
And it's not only third parties or your vendors; it's also your clients. I've seen a lot of attacks happening on clients trying to infiltrate an organization.
Yeah, I've experienced clients in the past who they're doing business and a 3-letter organization walks up to their door, knocks on the door and says, "Hey, you got something going on." They didn't even know about it. The way they find out, which is also another interesting statistic, I think, is I think 50% or more of the breaches are not because those internal organizations are discovering them. It's because whoever breached it has, put it on the dark web or is selling the data or it's exposed. They're like, "Hey, we've got it." And that's how they find out. And so that's pretty frightening.
Yeah, it is very frightening. And I did it several times. A phishing attempt hijacked a domain name. And I reached out to the domain owner and said, "Hey, do you realize your domain name is being used for phishing attempts?" And then we had no idea. And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's being used for phishing attacks. So do something." And they were completely surprised. They didn't, even realize that. Robert, you're new in the industry, but looking from the outside, what do you think the trends were for 2022 in your perspective?
I think one of the most alarming ones that I read as I was going through my program and kind of getting leveled up and kind of my finger on the pulse of cybersecurity was the weaponization of IoT devices, and not just for stealing your identity or stealing your money, but for tracking people. So many cases of assault and other just horrible acts, air tags that were in the news constantly and other GPS devices. But I think the one that I'm going to touch on, because it's been the biggest hot button thing that I can think of in my 1-year education of cybersecurity, is the skills gap. And there was a report from ISC workforce study. It increased 26.2% this year over from 2021. So that was the one that's always discussed. And I think the thing is, some people will say there is one, some people will say there isn't one, and the whole round and round of that.
Yeah, and I know the three of us on here, Robert, we're all very strongly opinionated that there is less of one than there should be. I think we all kind of agree that the skills gap is the gap between the organization understanding what they actually need and what they want to get, right? So that's a big problem. Is this popped up on LinkedIn today. Somebody posted about what's the problem with the talent situation, and it's like the whole process is broken, right? From our talent acquisition, the systems we use, to a hiring manager not even knowing what skills they need and what's actually relevant, right? Everybody wants to, I've seen executive level job descriptions that have knowledge of certain coding languages required, and that's just ridiculous, right? So not knowing what's needed is causing a lot of that gap. So it's tough.
Yeah, I think the question that we asked as students too, when they would say there's not really a skills gap and there's not entry level employment, but it was okay, well, if there's not entry level employment and the skills gap is needed in these higher, more skilled, tenured positions, then what are you doing to get your entry level people to move up into those positions? That was a big question we asked. Like, what are companies doing?
Or even in the mid level, like a lot of organizations have, they hire on experience, and I'm a big proponent of hire what somebody is capable of doing. I've gone through training on hiring, not just for security, but for everything. And the whole goal to get somebody to leave a company and come work for you is, hey, I've got this new thing that's exciting for you to work on. If all you have to offer is the same job they already have, then what's the value other than money, right? So you got to push people up into the ranks. And that means taking someone who's got capability of doing that next level work, not has already done it for 10 years, right?
That's true. Josh, what do you think? What's your opinion about the skill gap? Does it exist even?
there exists a skills gap, but it's really more, kind of as Will was saying, it's a gap in understanding what you really need, what you really want. You know, everyone wants to hire, a senior engineer because they don't want to put time and effort into training. They don't want to, you know, have someone that, you get them and you're paying them and you're not seeing real production out of them for, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. But ultimately, you have to really understand that, if you're not providing that, you're hurting yourself. You have to provide that ability for upward mobility, provide that path forward. Because if not, they are going to jump to the next company that's going to give them that opportunity. I'm a big proponent on hiring based off of, you know, desire and aptitude versus, hard skills. If I have someone who has really done a bunch of stuff in, say Tenable, and I need a Tenable engineer, and I have someone who's done stuff in Qualys, but's not really big into Tenable, but they have all the right aptitudes, I might hire the Qualys guy over the Tenable guy because I know they can learn Tenable. They're not that different, but they have what I'm really looking for, which is that desire, the skill, and they actually want to be where I'm at.
Teaching the button pushing is easy, right? I don't care what firewall technology you've used. You need to understand what a rule does and why it matters, right? You need to understand how the perimeter works, how the cloud works. If you can communicate, I never really ever interviewed or made decisions based on somebody's technology or specific, even like GRC, which is more of my background. I used to get my SAs trained if they didn't have GRC experience, I would go have them get a QSA certification because it teaches them about how GRC works. It teaches you how to assess a company, how to interpret rules, and then once you do that, you can download any other framework and interpret it, right? You can ask an expert with the things you don't need, right? It's understanding that fundamental, again, what's your capability? What can you do? Not what have you done, right?
Like, I can teach pretty much anybody anything. I can't teach you to want to learn.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. So I'm putting a little bit of fire now. I know, Josh, you have a very strong opinion on that. Let's talk about the CISSP certification by ISC Square. Joshua,
What do you want to know about it?
What's your opinion on that?
I think the certification itself, the material that it covers, is good. I think that there are a lot of people that have abused the process for CISP and have devalued their certification based off of getting the piece of paper and then not putting the work in afterwards to maintain that knowledge level. I get a whole bunch of people I interview all the time for a whole plethora of roles, and I'll see someone with a master's degree with a focus on information assurance, and they'll have a CISP, and then I'll ask them a question as simple as, what cybersecurity frameworks, regulations, and requirements do you know, and how do they tie back to this job? And I get a glassy, blank face, and they can't spit out something as simple as NIST, HIPAA, CIS, PCI, any or GDPR, CCPA, any of these frameworks that kind of fall into that. And now I know that's over half your degree and 26% of your CISP. So if you can't spit out one of those at a high level, you're devaluing that certification, that degree for everyone else that has it. Because now when I see that, I've now lowered my expectation for that. I think, and that's the point of certifications, is to demonstrate, knowledge and experience. And when, as a cohort, as holders, you don't hold each other accountable, and your continuing education program isn't doing the things that it needs to do, you slowly devalue that certification. You talk, 20 years ago, CISP was like, oh my God, you're like the most brilliant person in the world. Now you see, no kidding, I know a guy who is 17 that has CISP. Not the associate, actual CISP.
I have to fully agree with you on that. I have a CISSP. I got it 8 years ago. I think I was just on the cusp of starting to be devaluated. When I got it, I had to send them names of previous bosses I had to prove that I have the experience needed on the domains to get my certificate. and they call them, like they send them an email. I see now people that are 20, 21 that have announced on LinkedIn that they've received their CSSP. And I'm like, how is that possible? Where did you get 5 years experience in these domains? I don't know. And it started really to kind of annoy me because I had the certificate. I worked hard for the certificate. It was a 4-hour test. And I had to prove my worth to it. And now college graduates are getting the certificate.
Yeah, that's interesting. My CISP number is in the early 100,000s, which doesn't sound old, but it really is if you look at how many people. And I failed the first time. I went through training to take it. I had the experience necessary. And to your point, both Josh and Ron, it's like we're at a crossroads. We're at a challenge because we need, and this is not just our industry. This is every industry. If you go to a mechanic, you want your mechanic ASC certified, right? That's just what you expect. So, they're always pushing everybody to get, I mean, I remember when I first got my CISP, yeah, it helped me garner a higher rate. It was an executive level certification. And now we see it on entry level entry level roles because back then having 5 years of or having at least 5 years of experience and then being able to pass the exam, which by the way, months and months of studying, was a very different endeavor. I haven't dug into what folks are doing, but I've definitely ran into people who have gotten the certification that I didn't think deserved it. But the alternative, well, what is the alternative, right? I think that's what it comes down to is when does it become so devalued that everyone stops looking for it? And I think it's gotten to the point where it is no longer a high dollar, high value certification. I think so in some respects, the sort of natural state is creating itself, right? Because so many of these people who maybe didn't quite deserve it, or maybe ISC Square didn't do what they needed to do to keep it up because they want to make money, and they want to drive usage out of it. That it put it in its place, I think. So now it doesn't hold the prestige that it used to. I maintain mine as because I have to. The same with but also the same with my ISACA stuff. My guidance to individuals when they want to look at doing training, I was like, take these tools. Me going through my CISP training, the years that I spent kind of knowing I was going to do that was great framework for me to look at how to evaluate information security, how to study. I would take practice tests, and if I didn't get something right and I didn't understand the right reason, then I'd go back and read the Sean Harris chapter on that. So that's where I learned about all the detail. I use that as a guideline. I think that's still a very valid way to go. But yeah, I CPEs, come on, I work in security well more than 40 hours a week. Why do I need to log when a vendor presentation?
Why do I need to log into an hour? And I think CISP is 120 hours in 3 years. So you have to go and watch a video. And I'm like, well, I do it on a day-to-day basis, but fine, I'll watch the video.
I volunteer to get mine. Like I help friends, I do VCSO work, or I help when my kids were in elementary school, I do say, whatever, but to get it done, to like do good stuff out of it. But yeah, the CPE part's kind of like, if you're in the industry, what's the point?
Yeah. So Jessica, by the way, Jessica joined us. Jessica, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you guys doing? It's cold.
It's cold.
I was out running errands and I was like, oh, this is like the worst time to be running errands.
Who's running errands in a bomb cyclone?
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
Just like we ran out of milk and had no bread. And I was like, oh, that's great.
What is it with French toast? And that's the only thing I can figure out. When the snow's coming, everybody has to make French toast. They need eggs, milk, and bread for some reason.
And I ran out of all three of those before this hit. And I was like, oh, whoops.
Sorry,
hey, Jessica, everybody introduced themselves, so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jessica Boyer. I'm currently a senior information security analyst at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island. And before transitioning into cybersecurity, I had been in the IT support side of the house industry for 20 plus years, and decided, cybersecurity is something that was really interesting to me, and I knew that's where the industry was headed. and I was just wanting to do more and give me more of a bigger challenge. And boy, is it a challenge! But I love it.
So we were talking about CISP certification. Robert, would you ever consider getting it? Do you want it? Is it a path that you're considering?
I don't, I guess I'd have to see where I'm at, because that's, you guys are talking about how 21-year-old kids had it. And I knew from my education that you had to have 5 years experience. And if you have like a master's or some a college degree, they'll kind of forgive a year or so. But so that's curious. But I guess if I felt the need for it, or if my employer said, hey, we'll put you through it, I would. I know, and I know some people are going to get mad that are watching, but I got in and they say that you can't do it, but you can. I don't have a single certification.
Me too.
I sat for one, barely missed it. I've got a lot of them lined up this year because I know they are good to have on your resume. Like he was saying, if you had a mechanic, he wants to be ASE certified. So, and there, as far as your pay scale goes too, you can probably command a little bit more money if you have certain ones. So I think what I'm going to do is I have my cert path now and just kind of see what my current employer thinks. And if sometime in the future, cybersecurity takes me to another employer, just kind of get with them and kind of see, because a lot of people will say that, well, certifications just so that you put the time in and studied. It doesn't really mean you're going to be a good cybersecurity, employee. It just shows that you sat down with the book and you passed the test. How are you going to be in the office with your team?
But that's a great point, Robert. And I was about to say, like, when I evaluate people, if I see someone has a CISP, CISA, CISM, whatever, or a, GSLC, whatever all of those other ones are, I use that as a reference to the rest of their material. If I were to see somebody who had a master's degree, no experience, and a CISP, that doesn't resonate with me reading a resume that's necessarily the right person. I see that person's trying, like, that's an entry level candidate right there. That's a great entry level candidate, but that's not somebody who's 5-10 years experience that I'm actually looking for to hire, right? So in your case, there's somebody asked about ask us to add some value on what that certification is. Any certification that you can get that adds value to your skills is always good, because yes, let's agree that the recruiting process is broken and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, a really good hiring manager is going to look at everything and quantify it, right? And again, my CISP and even the CISM was not easy. It was work. It was effort. Like, I had to put in the time to do it, and I knew what was going through. It wasn't a Security Plus certification, right? So knowing that you have that, some valuable experience, some references, some referenceable work, I mean, all of that ties in to create this whole package. I think the misnomer is, I can get a master's degree in a CISP and I'm going to go get $100,000 a year job. And the guidance I've always given everybody is, if you've got a bachelor's degree, go get a job. Get your master's after you've got 10 years, right? When you want, when you're thinking about going that executive level route and you need that master's programs, because a bachelor's degree with 4 years experience is way better than a master's with none, right?
What do you think about
get your master's when someone else is paying for it?
Exactly. That's exactly how you do it.
That's exactly it. Somebody else is paying for it.
Yes.
What do you think about people coming, instead of going so I didn't go the college route, traditional college route. I went a trade school route, technical trade school, where we got a lot of hands-on experience. And for me, that really solidified what I would be doing out there. And it really opened a lot of doors for me, because when they read my resume and read what I did through school, like, I immediately picked up a job right out of school. Like, I had my A+ and my Network Plus. We did CCNA. But really, those certs were back in early 2000, right? So they've expired. Now they expired ever so often. But those are the ones that I held. Plus having some vendor certifications, like I was Dell certified technician and some other stuff throughout different jobs. But when I talk to people coming into it, I'm like, if you can get some training in a trade school, and to me, it's less expensive than a college, a 4-year degree, and you really get that hands-on experience. I think.
Yeah, I mean, the three of us here all probably got our training at our trade school was the military, right?
Yeah.
I have the advantage of saying I have 8 years of experience because I was doing the work in the Marine Corps, but it's essentially a trade school where you're going to work and doing the role. The great thing about the military is if you want to do something, they'll put you in the job. They don't care about your experience certifications. If they need something done, they find a person, they stick them there, and they do it, and you learn how to do it, and then you get out with 20 years experience or whatever. And so it's an equatable thing. And I remember at least 8-10 years ago, the director of the NSA saying how they needed to change the way that they evaluated, especially offensive security people, because they were requiring degrees and all of this work, and they weren't getting people because, in my experience, the folks who do really good pen testing and really good hacking, they're doing it all the time. They're not going to school. They're doing it right now while we're having this conversation. They're downstairs because it's the life they live and they love it, and that's why
it's the tinkering. It's the tinkerers. Yeah,
it's a way of living. It's not a job.
Yeah, and to your point, trade schools are great. I went to a vocational high school, where half of your school year was learning to do whatever your trade was. And they had, health occupations, horticulture, diesel mechanic, carpentry, graphic arts, IT. And that was literally what you learned in school. And they had a program that immediately your senior year, you went to school 1 week and you worked at a job the other week at an actual place doing that work. So when you graduated high school, you had, 2 to 3 years of no kidding training, and then 1 year of actual experience, and it works out great. My middle daughter did the exact same thing. She went to the local trade school here in high school, and started learning networking, A+, all that kind of stuff, and transferred into community college. Direct transfer, and she was almost a full semester ahead of her peers because she was able to leverage, trade school and then moving into that community college program before she even hits a, traditional 4-year school.
So let's take a question. Hold on. Let's take a question before.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just because Steve added like.
I'm gonna put some questions here, so I'm gonna run through them. And I think, Joshua, you already answered this one, right? Can you guys add value of certification path, like which one could be good considering someone at a SOC analyst role with 1 to 2 years experience? And Joshua, I think you answered that one. So SOC BLT1, SOC 2 is for range force. Is this the CompTIA one? Yeah, that's the CompTIA one.
Yeah.
So
CYS is the range, or is the CompTIA. I picked a few that were kind of different vendors, different focus. Obviously, CYSA and GCIH are, more recognized. But if you want hands-on stuff, Blue Team Level 1, Range Force SOC 1, SOC 2 were very intensive hands-on type programs that you're going to do actual, SOC type work. Again, it goes back to what type of job are you getting? Where are you trying to go? If you're trying to go into, government work, Fed, DOD, you're going to want to go get something off of the 81 or 8570, 8140 list that they approve. If you're looking to just, expand your skills and actually get some hands-on, do that Blue Team Level 1, Range Force career path where it's deep dive into those SOC processes and procedures. You could even go and do the free Splunk training or the free Elastic programs that just get you into the tools that you're going to use, because a SIM is a SIM is a SIM. You might have to learn the different syntax.
Yeah.
Splunk works one way and Devo works another, but
yeah,
the logic you're applying to that.
Yep.
I would add to that. Don't disregard the Microsoft behemoth that is. The way that they're doing, and what will ultimately AWS and GCP will follow, right? They're the cloud providers on what they're building out and having familiarity with their capability, because we are moving to when I talk about 2023 and up, we're moving to a platform first methodology in security. So that's, having that familiarity. Understanding cloud in general is just, super valuable. And you want to talk writing yourself a check, like that's an easy way to do it.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, there are some really low effort, low cost entries into the cloud environment. You'll see, Cloud Plus and, the ICS squared CCSP that are super high dollar, but for $100 each, you can go do the AZ900 Foundation from Microsoft. You can go do the AWS CCP, Cloud Practitioner, and that gives you a really good foundation in what cloud is and how cloud works.
I think the
While you
Google
go
Cloud
learn
ones are
how to do other tools.
Yeah.
I think the
And
Google
it'll be
Cloud
on a
ones are
job
free.
description. Probably. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
And it's something people don't think about a lot because Google has a very small cloud print, but it's still a print, and people need to protect that. And since not a lot of people are looking at it, it would be a great way to get yourself into cloud security.
And as somebody who's worked for a Microsoft-owned company, if you don't have Azure experience, but you have GCP experience or you have AWS experience, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, Josh. You understand the theory and the concept of it. I'll teach you the button pushing. Right? So if you've got those certifications, especially, then you say, hey, I've got interest in cloud security. Well, the company will hire you for, whatever specific route that needs to be.
Right. And for me as a hiring manager, that's a differentiator. I'm hiring security folks, so I'm looking, if you're going to do certifications or degrees, I'm looking for, kind of that security focused. But then if I also see that you also have cloud certifications, that's going to make me gravitate to you a little bit more because you have a bit broader knowledge. You're not very siloed. So for me, that's a low cost of entry, shows depth and breadth, and, makes you a more desirable candidate for a very low cost with a high return on investment. And for me, that's kind of what I look for when I'm advising folks on what they should do is what's going to give them the best return on investment. Obviously you can go pay, 10 grand to go through a, CISP boot camp. Well, what's that really going to do for you? For under $1,000, I can give you a training plan that gives you Security Plus, AWS, Azure, plus some project management. And you're going to get a lot more return on that because one, it's a lower entry cost. And two, it's giving you all those fundamental things that you're actually going to use.
All right.
Robert, somebody asked a question. Do you have a degree in tech, like IT or something like that?
I do not. I basically have a certification from the University of Michigan.
You did a boot camp, didn't you?
Yeah. And there was value in it, but that's another thing too. I would tell people there are some good ones, but really dig into the curriculum and what you're going to be teaching, because although there was value in what I just went through, had I have the opportunity to do it over again, I would do it differently because it very much was the fire hose approach. Mm-hmm. I know a little about a lot of stuff. I can talk to you a little bit about PowerShell, a little bit about Python, a little bit about DFIR, a little SOC, a little red team. But I would say, and I don't know if these exist, because I know a lot of people, as they get older, they don't have time to go back to a traditional program with all the fluff of electives and everything. So they want the nuts and the bolts. And I hope to see, and they could be out there, I just haven't found them yet, but more kind of boot camps that are steered towards, okay, you're going to be in this program for a year, but this is blue team, or this is a red team boot camp, or this is a GRC boot camp, instead of going, we're going to teach you some short 6 to 10 week modules of everything and just have them be more focused on what skill would you like to enter into the field. Because you can enter in as a blue teamer and then 5 years later you find yourself doing pen tests, as long as you don't close yourself off to opportunities.
You struck a chord in my heart, Robert. As a lifelong generalist, I always tell people I know a little bit about a lot of things. I don't know a lot about any one thing, right? And that's kind of the challenge with a lot of these programs, because I talk to individuals like yourself or people in the chat that they want to get into the industry, and I always say, look, you need to have know what you want to do. Do you want to be in offensive security? Do you want to be in the SOC? Do you want to do in GRC? But be open to doing anything to get in the door, right? You take that first step anywhere you can, and then work your way up through internally. And then as you grow, you'll find a way you can specialize. If you want to specialize, that's great. They're pen testers. A lot of times they want to be the best pen tester they can be, and that's it. And that's great. We need those folks. But then you have people who, like me, I've been in just about every other department and hopped around. And then you can work at a more strategic level and kind of orchestrate things. But there's opportunities for both. And I think what happens is a lot of those boot camps and a lot of those broad courses, especially in college, I think I won't get into why the education system we have, but they could not give a degree in penetration testing. They couldn't give you 4 years worth of work to go through to have a pen testing degree. So they have to give you this big and alchemist cybersecurity thing. So that you're going to, at the entry level, you're going to kind of see a lot of those things. And so as Josh said, you kind of have to pick the right things that are going to help you mature the area you want to go with. Right.
And I think that's some advice I would.
So
I know
that-
there's
that's-
some new people watching, but
Yeah, so let's pivot to this question downstairs and connect it to what you guys are talking about. So there's what about non-IT professionals aspiring to transition to cyber? Are they recommended to sign up for trade schools, if not a degree program? So somebody that's not in IT, how do they get into cybersecurity? What's the best advice we can give them?
So there's we talked about free certifications and training. I think depending on where you're at if you're in a typical business and you can I always tell people to volunteer, right? So the organization you're in, if you can get some security work. So one of my first role, even though I was in an IT position, I was a business continuity manager for a while, right? That helped me get into security, and I helped with PCI, right? Sort of raising your hand and saying, hey, I'm interested in doing security stuff. A lot of times with your current employer will help, depending on where you're at now. If you're a mechanic already or you're a baker, that's going to be a little bit harder to do. And then I think that's where you've got to look at just finding training that's applicable to you, using that, and then connecting with your network. I mean, Ron's the king of posting 7,000 websites of free information. That's why I'm here. I'm just here to get Ron's free information, right? So
I want to talk about that. So we have a buddy. He's on LinkedIn. He's very adamantly against those websites. And I say, why not? Why not give everybody the information? Me as a cybersecurity practitioner and also as a mentor, I give you the information. What do you do with it? It's up to you. I don't need to spoon feed you anything. Like I'm not going to do that. I give you the information. I point you to tools. I point you to resources. You need to go in there and take possession of your future and do it.
So I know who you're talking about. He's a good friend of mine. And
He's a good friend of ours. We all love him, but he's adamantly against that.
But I don't disagree with his mentality, because there are folks like you that do a really great job of posting lists that you've vetted. They're not just, random stuff that you've found and just spew out. You've put the time and effort into saying, no, this is good material. Please look at this. And that's why I think his problem is that there are a lot of folks, and I'll use the dirty word that I completely hate, that are influencers that just throw lists that they found elsewhere out. And they've not done any vetting. They don't, verify that there's quality content there. It's just a list to drive, clicks, likes, and, get their engagement up. There's a big difference between, providing a list of these are things that are tied directly to this particular subject that I know is good material, versus, hey, I found this top 10 list somewhere on the interwebs and let me go ahead and just copy and paste this in and click post. That's a vastly different kind of mentality. I put a lot of information out to, you guys do too. And it's kind of one of those things where if I'm putting it, for me, my name and my reputation is something that I value. To me, it's the only thing I own in my life is, my name and my reputation. So I'm putting something out, I'm putting my name on it. I have personally vetted that material. That's, I don't want someone to go looking at it like, Josh Copeland told me to go do this thing, and it was complete crap.
Yeah.
And that ruined my reputation. So
I think Robert should tell us how he got in, because I have a really, I think everybody needs to hear what he did.
Yeah, and the big thing is network, and I studied my tail off in front of these 3 monitors I got in front of me. But afterwards, when I graduated, I talked to my neighbors, anybody I knew. I went to career centers. I used the career counseling through my program. But at the end of the day, a friend of mine who works for a pretty large company, they outsourced their IT to this company I'm going to work for. And he called me and he said, man, every time I speak to them, they're asking me, do you know anybody that's on the hunt? And he gave me a link to a human resources page, but they didn't have the job offer that I was looking for. And I said, well, it's right around the corner. So I got up, I put on a nice shirt, dress shoes, it looked professional. I walked into the front door. I picked up the phone and dialed 0. And I said, my name's Robert Taylor, and I understand you're hiring. Is there someone I could speak with? And a few minutes later, the HR director comes out. She was awesome. And she spoke to me for about 10 minutes. And she said, I'm going to push this through. And actually, when she reached back out to me again for the interview, she says, I've been in IT and in HR for over 20 years, and no one's ever done that. Just come in. And I'm not saying you can just walk into any door, but, if it's a smaller company, why not go down there? Hey, bring coffee and just get in the door. And that's probably the biggest reason why I got the job. They said between that and your personality, like, we could just tell that you were driven to break in and learn, and we knew that you were going to be a good investment.
It's interesting you say that, because I literally just had a conversation. So my internet went out this morning because of the storm, and so I was like calling them up on the phone with support, and just got into a conversation with this guy. He's driven to get into cybersecurity, and he was like, I've done this path, I'm doing my certs, but I want to try to get my foot in the door. So I took this IT support role, getting me some experience, and I think that was awesome. And I was like, hey, after this call, look me up on LinkedIn. He was like, I don't even have a profile on LinkedIn. I was like, you need to make your profile. Get on LinkedIn, find me. I was like, and I was telling him like my whole spiel while he's like doing his stuff in the background. But it's so awesome when you just like have that kind of open personality to start talking to people. And I don't know, I have a heart for IT support side, because that's where I came up through. So that's twice now that I've called IT support and talking to them about cybersecurity, or they're interested in it. And I'm like, hey, find me on LinkedIn. And I had one actually find me already through LinkedIn.
I love this. And it's the same thing I preach to my kids. Do something.
Yeah.
Do something. Whatever it is, just go in a direction and keep going. And then when you figure something out, pivot and do the other, like that. Don't just sit and wait. And you've got to talk to as many people as possible. I mean, everybody here on this call is because of what we do, right? Because of talking to other people and educating and networking. And that's why I was like excited when Robert said, I have not heard that happen, but I'm a big proponent of, like I said, get that job anywhere you can first and get into. I tell people to look at companies you want to work for and people you want to work with and connect with them. And you'll eventually get to, it's just like we talk about, you're not going to be a CISO tomorrow. Eventually in your career, you're going to get to a stage where there are people and companies that just want to hire you. And they don't have a position necessarily like, hey, I want to bring Robert on. I want to bring Jessica on because I know they're great. And that's all that matters. And that's what you should work towards. Instead of necessarily building up the resume is, one thing, but like, think about it that way. Think about it as a networking exercise and a doing something exercise rather than a checkbox list.
So, and I think that's what with me too, and a lot of people that I've spoken to since then, they've turned down roles, is don't cherry pick. He called me and said, we like you, and we didn't really have anything for you right away, but we created a position. And he said, would you be willing to learn and help out with some logistics stuff when we, have a laptop come in and we upgrade it and it goes back out? And he said, that'll take up about 2 hours of your morning. But then after that, you'll come and work with me in the security operation network operations center. Is that something sounds like you would do? And I said, of course. If you're giving me the opportunity to come in the door, I don't care if I need to run the mail out every day and come back. I just want to get in the door and learn. Yeah.
And it will always help you. When I was young, I had a director advise me, like he talked to me about all the different departments he'd worked in at the company we had, from distribution to warehousing to he was running the development group. And it was just about being open to doing different things. That's really
Joshua, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. So for me in my career, 2 things have been critical to me having success. One, saying yes. When someone asks me to do something, even if it's outside of, my little box that I'm supposed to be in, saying yes has paid me huge dividends. Second one, networking. Just being out there, getting to know people, building your reputation. Every job I've had since I've left the military has been because I knew somebody that they reached out to me and said, I want you to come work for me here. And then that has led to me getting a job there, saying yes to opportunities internal to that organization, and moving up through those, various positions. But 100% networking, it has been how I've gotten where I am, building that reputation and just having those professional relationships I hire people straight from networking. That's kind of my go-to for things. Like, I have an open position and I want to hire somebody. I will totally post that on LinkedIn saying, I'm hiring right now.
That's
Send me
how
your
my,
resume.
yeah, that's how my
And I will
first,
send people your way. Everybody I know. I don't care. I'll help anybody I can the same
yeah.
way.
My first position with eHealth, like the hiring manager, she reached out to me and she was like, "Hey, I saw your content and I really like what you got on there and got going." And she was like, "I'd love for you to apply and interview." And of course, I shot her back with some questions about the position and stuff like that. And but it's really amazing what you can do with networking. And even like even in between jobs, I had in between jobs that weren't technical, right? I've been a waitress, I worked in retail. And that whole time, I didn't realize that I was networking. I would talk to people. Hey, what do you do? What do you do? Well, this is my career. And I had this guy give me his business card for a company. He said, "Here, why don't you apply?" Because I was in between IT jobs and I was waitressing. And like, you never know where the next opportunity comes from.
Somebody way more famous than me said it. I can't remember who it was, but become famous in your own hometown. Find a place. Go there every day at the same time, all the time. Get to know everybody there. Like, I have a local restaurant bar that I go to. I know all the bartenders, and you'll find out there's a waitress or there's a bartender I work with. She's like the personal assistant to like a major pharmaceutical company nearby. There's other people who will come in and go work, and you will find opportunity. You'll be amazed at what happens if you build up just the tiniest bit of reputation in your own little circle, and that virtually as well too. But that whole idea is so relevant.
Well, and to that, there are tons of professional organizations that are all over the place. For those of us who are in the military, AFC is huge. It's international, and it's got military, academic, industrial base. That's huge networking opportunities. ISSA has chapters everywhere. ICS Squared has chapters everywhere. PMI has chapters. There are all these professional organizations all over the place that have meetings, whether they be virtual or in person, that you can get to know other people. And then when you get to know them, that opens those opportunities where I have, an opportunity for, a V-Scissor role. Let me pick up the phone and call Will and see if he's remotely interested. And if he's not, that's fine. But he's going to give me like 3 names of people he knows it might be.
I know somebody else that'll do it, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, exactly. And if there's one thing I regret not doing is starting my networking journey 20 years ago.
Agree.
That's if I have one regret, it's that.
I can't speak highly enough of it because it's crazy. Like, for people that are watching right now, if you think you can't do this, I'm living proof. This time last year, I was getting out of a very long career that I did not like. And if you would have told me almost a year later, I'd be sitting right here on this podcast talking to Josh is a big LinkedIn influencer, and Ron, I would have been like, "You're crazy. What are you talking about?" But I put myself out there. I was positive. I told my story. I tried to, I had to take a break from LinkedIn for a little while because it was getting overwhelming, but I'm telling you, it works and you can do it. I mean, and as soon as Ron messaged me, he said, "Would you like to come sit on this?" I was like, I'll offer what I can, but of course I'm here. Like, I'm telling you, if you work it and you're not afraid to put yourself out there, or if you need to do something to get over that fear of putting yourself out there, you'll be amazed what comes back in return if you just put yourself out there with an ounce of positivity. I mean, the benefits and the rewards you reap are immeasurable.
Yeah, I call it get uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. And I had a connection of mine challenge me, and that's how actually my previous hiring manager found me. She saw one of my videos I posted, but he challenged me in a post to do video content, and I hate being on video. I'm like, I don't like it. I don't like seeing myself talk or anything like that. So here I was. I did my first video in my closet, hiding from my kids because they're loud. Like, you can hear them. So it was just getting used to being uncomfortable, and I kept doing it, and it kept getting easier. And it really is something you just got to get over that fear, get over being uncomfortable with it.
And you need to do it. Like, I'll give you a personal example. I had LinkedIn for 20 years or whatever, and when I got laid off, I had a ton of connections, and I just kind of thought I had them and whatever. And the reason I'm where I'm at now is because during that time, sure, there were job offers relatively quickly, but it wasn't right ones. They weren't the ones I needed. And the people I were connected to, you know, if you're not maintaining that relationship, you're not getting, you know, you don't get that instant offer, you know. And more recently when I made so, you know, more recently when I was just like, hey, I need to change gigs, I looked and it took a whole lot less time than I thought it would, because you build and nurture that relationship. You get people that want you to come work for them. They just want to be around you and they know your skills. And I'm a big proponent of all the people I work with at my companies and anywhere, like, build your personal brand. And you don't have to be Gary Vee, right? You don't need 50 million followers, but like, if you talk to somebody who follows you and interacts with you on a regular basis, they should be able to tell you, like, the first time somebody said, hey, will you say these things? And this is the message I hear you saying. I was like elated. I was like, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's great. Somebody got it.
So I will tell you, and people will be shocked to hear this. One, I'm an extreme introvert. Like, I hate peopling. You know, that is, you know, one of my biggest things.
So let's
Second,
hold
I
on.
hate public speaking.
Who here is an introvert on this call right now? Lift their hands.
I'm an omnivert, which is a cop out. I know it, but like, I have
That's
a
a
really
cop-out.
strong social battery. That's the way it works.
I'm one of the most extroverted people you'll ever meet.
Me too. I get my highs from being around people and talking.
That works out. 2 introverts, 2 extroverts, and the guy in the middle. Like,
Yeah.
So that's the thing is, I hate public speaking, and I'm an extreme introvert. But where am I? Here on a podcast, live with who knows how many people, talking and interacting with folks. Because, kind of to Jessica's point, you know, you have to get real comfortable with being uncomfortable. You know, it's part of that saying yes mentality of, you know, do I really want to be public speaking? Probably not. But I care about what we're talking about. I care about the message, and I want to help people. So that means, you know, this thing that I'm not real comfortable with, I need to kind of get over myself to be able to do these things that I actually value.
So let me ask you guys, because I've been doing something the last couple of years that I never did in the past. I'll go down my connections list, and it's a copy paste. Hey, let's get together and chat. I'm not a sales guy. I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I've had tremendous outreach. I've just gotten on kind of conference calls with people. Sometimes we talk shop. Sometimes we find opportunities. I talked to a CISO locally about board games for half an hour one day, right? Just that idea of like getting on people that even here, like, this is the first time and I have probably heard each other's voice, right? Because as much as we communicate on LinkedIn, we haven't gotten on that. So I'm curious, like, who else has kind of had conversation and had random meetups because of this?
Oh, I totally have. You know, I'll get folks that, you know, we'll converse back and forth, you know, a couple days, and like, all right, let's just schedule a 30-minute Zoom call and, you know, just have that direct communication. You know, there are folks that, you know, I don't like using the word mentor because it's really not that kind of, but it's a professional friendship where it's, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. Let's schedule a call and just catch up. And what's going on? You know, where can I help?
It's like that too with the coworkers and teams that I've worked on before, because it's like, you know, keeping contact with them and is a really great thing to do, because I've had previous coworkers reach out to me, hey, do you know about any positions? Or I've reached out to them, hey, do you know? But it's really just keeping that whole networking thing going has been really beneficial. And then what you said before, like, I've had conversations with all kinds of people on LinkedIn, and then I'll say, hey, let's jump on a quick 30-minute call and discuss stuff. And it's been awesome. And I wish I could do it more than what I do, but like, you know, I have a full-time job, I have kids, you know, so it's hard. I'll go in lulls where I can do something, you know, for a good week, and then I'll drop off for a little bit. And I feel bad about it, but it's like, it's just life. It's kind of crazy at times.
Don't let the algorithm dictate your life.
Yeah, no, I try to just like,
okay.
You know, I help where I can, and I try to ignore, you know, I don't have like a huge amount of following, and that's fine. But, you know, the people that I do reach and they do give me feedback and stuff, it's been phenomenal. And that's why I keep, you know, hanging out and being here, is because, you know, I do want to help. I do want to give back, because you guys, people that were on LinkedIn, when I got, like you said, I had a profile out there since 2014 that I never did until I went through like a layoff. And like, mid-pandemic 2020, and I got hooked up on LinkedIn, and there was so much support in this community, and that's why I stay hooked up too, because I want to give that back. It was given to me, and I want to keep doing that for other people.
That's a good point you mentioned. Like, you don't have a big following, and I don't think that if you're going after followers, you're not doing it for the right reasons, right? But at the end of the day, there's some statistic, like the majority of people on LinkedIn aren't engaging. They're just consuming. So when you're putting stuff out there, you're still being heard. You're still being seen. Like that HR person that called you and said, hey, we saw what you're doing, may not have ever communicated at anything that's going on. So for everybody who's out there, and this is a Gary Vee thing, right? Do it for the 1 or 2 people that are actually gonna like it, and they're gonna engage, and be okay with like 3 people responding, because the 15, 30 other people that are gonna see it, they're paying attention, and it's all gonna matter at the end of the day.
I have to agree with it 100%. Sometimes I get messages in my inbox and telling me, Ron, you helped me so much. Thank you for everything you've done. And I don't know them. I've never spoken to them directly. They've never commented or liked any of my posts, but they're just consuming the information, and it helped them.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the same thing where it's, somebody who I've never seen, like or engage in anything, sent me a message saying that I helped them get a job and that they consider me one of their mentors because of all the content I put out. I'm like, that's awesome. I'm glad that you're getting value of the stuff I'm putting out, because, ultimately I could be talking to a complete empty room, or I could be talking to, a whole group of people, but I'm still putting something out there. I'm trying to do what I can for the group, and, seeing that folks are consuming it and getting value out of it is why I continue to do that kind of stuff.
So, Ron,
I had a guy reach out. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, Ron, I want just to say, I want to do one of these for those of us who don't have 50,000 followers, to get together, because and have that conversation. Like, let's talk about what we do to better, as people, as I'm not gonna use the word, but what can we do to better help the community, right? As those people sort of speaking, because I really like to hear what everybody else is doing and what's working and things like that. And then I'll stop. Go ahead, Jessica.
I was just gonna say, where you see job posts and people post jobs, and I'll comment commenting for reach or commenting for that. And then I started seeing posts like, oh, don't do that. You shouldn't do that. Well, that same day that I saw that post, like, you shouldn't do that, I had a guy reach out to me. He was like, I have a job because you commented on somebody's job post, and I saw it and I applied for it. And he's like, that's the only reason I have this job is because you
do absolutely need to do that.
Like, yeah.
When you comment, then your network sees it. What you don't want to do, everybody listening to however many people, don't just say, I'm interested. Look at my profile. Look, we get it. You're awesome and you're great.
I'm not going to look at your
searching through all those.
I'm not going to look at your profile.
It's your job to find a job. Like, it's your job to find that effort. No one's out. No one. If you're not super well known and somebody's not, everybody aren't hunting you. Just saying, hey, check out my profile is not going to do it. Like,
so there's about 65 people.
Yeah.
So they are listening. Joshua, a couple of things for you. Well, one thing for you. Where did unpopular opinion guy came from?
I love it.
All right. So, like every good story, what had happened was about 1.5 years or so ago, I started kind of initially it was a post about, why certifications are crap. And
I like where this is going.
It's clickbait.
And it's ironic because it's a guy, when you click on my profile and you see like 80 certifications and you go, wait, what? And it's me basically going, a certification is only worth as good as, the information that you retain from it. If you have this certification, you put it on your resume, I'm going to ask you questions about it. If you don't know it, I'm probably not going to hire you because you're just, cert hunting for the purpose of getting paper and getting through that, ATS system and getting through that first round of, HR recruiters filtering people out, and you're getting people where I actually want to hire that actually have passion for this aren't getting in. That rolled into the next one of, your college degree isn't worth anything. And kind of breaking out to where, your your college degree, your major, you're getting less than a fourth of your degrees in your major. That's spread out over 4 years. It generally takes between 3 to 5 years for a curriculum to get updated. So anything that you're learning your freshman year was outdated the date it was taught to you, and it's severely outdated by the time that you're actually graduating. So a good majority of that information is not really worth anything. So your major doesn't really matter much to me. The fact that you went to college tells me that you have, some project management skills, that you can do long-term tasks, you can do some planning, you can do, probably some group teamwork, even with somebody who's sandbagging your team, you can overcome obstacles, you can deal with challenges. The degree tells me some stuff, but your major doesn't really tell me a whole lot other than you might have some basic understanding there. And then that rolled into the next day of, your experience doesn't mean anything either. And it was kind of going with the, what your experience is matters, not the fact that you have experience. And I use the example of the guy who has worked in DoD doing ACAS Tenable, and all they do all day for the last 10 years is click the run report button and do ad hoc scans. And they'll put on their resume that they're a Tenable SME with 10 years experience. And that's all they've done. Now, conversely, I'll have another guy who's done, 6 to 8 legitimate full-blown Tenable deployments where they're building it out, doing the policies, putting out all the scanning stuff. They're creating their own compliance scans. They're doing everything, and they have 2 years experience. 2 years, because they've only done it for 2 years. But arguably, the guy with 2 years experience is far more of a SME than the guy with 10 years. And he's the one I want to hire because he's done all the things, not the one thing for 10 years. So experience doesn't really matter unless you're able to articulate what that experience is. And then it just kind of snowballed from there, where I'm giving kind of unpopular takes on various opinions across the board.
I would argue it's not unpopular. It's about perspective, because you're not wrong, right? It's not, well, and I'm just playing on it, right? But it's like, to your point, 2 years of diverse comprehension and capability and execution is way more valuable than 5 years of following a flow chart, right? Like anybody can read the flow chart and push the buttons because we haven't developed the AI for it. And that's really what you're saying. You're saying at the end of the day, I want to know that you're capable of doing something and you understand what's being done. And that's really what, I mean, I went to a boot camp early in my career and I learned a lot of stuff really quick. And even at the boot camp, they said, look, this doesn't make you an expert. This means you have the foundational knowledge to go and step into that role. And that's all a bachelor's degree even is, right? So the more diverse skill you can learn, the better, right? Vocational school, bachelor's degree, self-training, whatever it is, and you can demonstrate that, then that's where the value comes, right? I think that's what you're getting at, right? Is the whole idea.
And that's the thing, is I'm framing it in kind of a different perspective, because ultimately I kind of got fed up with the, super positive, everything's awesome, you deserve a job. Like, no, you don't.
Toxic positivity.
Exactly.
And toxic positivity is actually a thing. They have a whole whole thing that they did a study on where, toxic positivity can actually kill you. There's a whole bunch of stuff around that.
As a Gen X, the everybody gets a trophy thing is not, not something we support.
So, I wanted to give a different spin, and, it seems to have found a niche where it's, I am, not the guy that's going to tell you, everything's awesome and you deserve everything that you get. I'm going to be the guy that tells you, no, you have to work harder, and this is where you need to work harder at.
Yeah,
whether
I
you
agree.
think that's
You have to work hard. It's not gonna be served on a silver or gold plate for you. None of the technology, IT, cybersecurity is. And if you think that, then you probably should reconsider if you want to join the IT cyber community, because nobody's gonna just give it to you. You have to study. It's a lot of studying, and it's continuing study. You always have to keep up with things. It never ends.
But I do want to stress, because I have a colleague I worked with when I was in the Marine Corps. He and I sat in a very small room with very thick doors and thick walls for several years, with a lot of red wires in it. And he went to work every day doing the same thing. And he still goes to work every day doing the same thing, logging into Cisco devices and making sure things are doing what they're supposed to. He's still basically a network engineer. He loves his job. And honestly, for people like me, we need those people because I need to be doing something different like every 10 minutes. So like, there's nothing wrong with like getting to a point in your career where like, this is what I'm happy doing. And I'm just going to stay here, and telling your boss, no, this is cool. Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm going to tap out on salary or whatever, like, and benefit. Like, there's nothing wrong with like becoming to a happy medium in life. Like the Swedish, Norwegian, it's Lagrom, right? It's if you look it up, you'll see it's like, it's just, and that's okay. You don't have to like be shooting to be Ron. Everybody doesn't have to do that.
And one of the things that
Don't be me.
what we do really wrong is we take those folks who are really, really good technical people, and then we try to make them managers because they're really good technical people.
Exactly.
We Peter principle them, where we get them where you are the best, network engineer that I have. I'm going to put you over the network engineering team, and you have zero talent for management.
You can do that. Train them to be managers. You want to talk? We talk about how they don't train entry-level people into roles, but when you move them into management, you need to do management training. First off, you need to ask the person that even want to do that.
That's
true.
You
want to be a manager.
Yeah. So here's the thing: when I worked in a bunch of places, smaller places, startups, financial firms, most companies do not have a separate promotion path for non-management individuals. And I'm like, this person is the best engineer ever. Don't take him to be a manager. He will be a bad manager and a good engineer, and we don't want that. Find a different path of promotion that is not managerial for them. And yes, people that do go to management position receive zero training in most of the places that I worked in, at least in the past, receive zero training for how to be a manager, how to be a leader, how to interact with people, how to understand the needs of your team and how to manage them. Doesn't exist.
I was fortunate. One of the companies I worked for, very recently built a technology path. So like you could because before you couldn't get to director level without like taking on managerial responsibilities. So they created a directorial technology path. And that's something I think a lot of organizations look at is you need to find ways to incent those. I'm living proof. I'm a, top technical person in the organization I'm with. And yeah, I like doing the management stuff, but like the knowledge of the technology is what's relevant. That's why I'm in the role I'm in. Right. So we need to have these outlets for individuals who don't want to just become pure people managers, for lack of a term. Right.
Yeah. And I think Will and Ron can kind of, agree with me on this. It was a culture shock for me when I left the service that there wasn't that management level training because, for us, oh, you're going to be a, non-commissioned officer. We're going to send you to a school that teaches you how to be a non-commissioned officer.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to be a senior non-commissioned officer. We're going to send you to a school to how to be a senior non-commissioned officer. Yeah. Oh, you're going to be a field grade officer. We're going to send you to squadron officer school. We're going to send you to war college. We're going to teach you the skills that you need to be able to be a leader. And then when I transitioned into the civilian side, it was like, there's no leadership training. There's no path for this. They're like, well, we'll go pay for you to do a certification for SHRM. I'm like, that's not the same.
No. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big advantage we all had. Cause from day one, when we all hit the Yellow Footprints boot camp, whatever it was, individually, you're all a leader, right? And in the military, that they instill that in you at some point. Whoever you are, at some point you could be in charge of 150, 100 people. Doesn't matter, right? You need to be able to take charge and disseminate information, all that. And yeah, in the civilian world, they don't do that as much. It's much more task oriented. So it is a challenge for those folks.
So I think we're getting to an hour and 10 minutes. So I'm going to ask you the last question of the day, and then we're going to be out. 2023 outlook. What do we see for the future? Joshua, let's start with you.
So I think you're going to see a lot more automation. Automation is going to be, kind of the critical thing that we need to put a lot of focus on, whether it's doing, just basic task automation for provisioning users, or you're going to, implement a SOAR into your, SOC type team to do some of those automatic remediations, whether you're going to, start putting some logic around how you access your data and, what your permissions around your data access is. But, AI and automation is going to be, the kind of the go-to thing, especially as we get more and more advanced attacks coming against us. With I think the average is 10 new vulnerabilities a day is what the average is right now. There's no way for people to keep up with that. Even if you put in a lot of, automated stuff for a MITRE attack, MITRE defense, you're still going to have to put in a lot more extra work to make those things really work well. And, machine learning, AI, and automation are going to be kind of the big push for that, especially for those networks that, haven't gotten the love and attention that they should have over the last, 10, 15 years, like OT and IoT.
Will?
So, the sexy thing here is IoT, OT weaponization. Space is probably going to get hacked for the first time. But I'm going to go with regulations. It's just going to get worse. Like almost every state in the U.S. has a data privacy regulation in process. California or, Colorado, or sorry, Canada is like on their second iteration. GDPR is going hard. And then you've got CMMC and all of these other, like everybody is trying that's the government, and not the, like any government, any world government organization you want to talk. They're trying to get a hold on cybersecurity. They know how relevant it is and what a big problem it is. We've seen critical infrastructure go down. We know that things can be weaponized and hurt. And so they're going to try and get a hold on it. And while they may not move as fast as they should, they'll move as fast as government does. And it's probably going to create a lot of problems, and people are not going to be prepared for it, especially for that mid-market and smaller businesses. It's going to be hard because they're not doing the basic things now that they should be, right?
Yeah. Small businesses and medium businesses are incredibly susceptible to new attacks. It's going to be interesting.
America, I think it's 750 million small businesses or something ridiculous like that. It's a ginormous amount of people.
Yeah. It's like 80% of all cyber attacks are in the SMB market.
Yeah. Jessica.
I am going with cloud security is going to expand, because all of a sudden I'm seeing a lot more jobs in that sector, and it's really honestly needed, because a lot of, even in the smaller businesses, are starting to move that way. Azure, AWS, Google, and when I tell people that are looking at coming into this industry, I tell them, like, if you have an interest in, look at cloud security, look at those certifications, because I start to see more and more jobs, cloud security engineer, cloud security, just like architecture type roles. Not that that's entry level, but you can see where you can kind of pivot your career into the way the market is being driven. And it's very much needed in cloud security, because there's a lot of mismanagement. There's a lot of, it's new. It's kind of like, I wouldn't say new technology, but it's like more and more companies are buying into it. And then they're like, oh, how do we manage this in the right way? What are the controls that we put behind it? And so having those type of skills will really benefit you.
Robert?
So Josh mentioned this earlier. It was kind of a theme for 2022, but I think it's going to get even bigger, because we saw this year Emotet, Conti, TrickBot, kind of these ransomware as a service things come back, which basically is enabling criminals with not a lot of deep tech skills to get into the game and make money. So I think you're going to see that. But I think you're going to see more attacks on managed service providers, because it increases a path into multiple partners and customers, which I think may start to push people into start talking. And this is something I just started reading about in the past few days, but a software bill of materials. People are going to start to get a little more detailed about those, because it can help you kind of identify any kind of security risks a little quicker. I know they're around, and I know there's some legislation about it, but I don't think it's required. But a good thing that I found.
You don't want another Log4j?
Is that like a BIA, Robert?
What's that?
Like a business impact analysis, or just having general asset management?
So a software bill of materials is a list of all the open source and third-party components present in a code base.
There's some, but so this is funny, because you're spot on. But it all goes back to asset management. And as long as I've been in consulting, every company of any size has really shitty asset management.
everybody has
because
shitty
it's not
asset
just like
management.
knowing your printers and laptops, it's knowing your applications, your data flows, having data owners and response. So you're dialed in, man.
So I have an ITIL certification, and as soon as I got that certification and read all the materials, because I do read everything and I go into there, and I'm like, holy shit, we're doing nothing.
Exactly.
We're absolutely doing nothing.
That's the thing is, there's still live Log4j vulnerabilities out there because people really don't know that they have it.
2 days ago, they know they have it, and they have to deal with a X number of devices. It's known.
Because the Log4j, the problem is it's an open source component, which is in existence for a bunch of other things except just Linux. It's existing in a lot of even Windows installations have that in there, and people don't even know about it. Like, I know certain companies that I worked with, and I talked to their CISOs and their security engineers, and they're like, yeah, we did it. We don't have any Log4j. And I'm like, are you sure? Because I think that software that you're using actually uses it to do some logging. And they're like, let me check. I'm like, oh my God, you're right.
And I'm like, chain.
So I will give you, when Log4j first came out, one of the guys that worked for me, a brilliant guy named Mark Willis, was teaching a kid that, was his girlfriend's nephew, had interest in Minecraft, and Log4j broke big in Minecraft because, that's kind of where it was broken in at, and was asking him questions, and he taught this kid, really deep down, like how Log4j works and, how to exploit it and all the good things around that. And the kid was about 12 and told him, don't do this. So what's the first thing that a 12-year-old does? He went home and bricked his refrigerator because they had a smart refrigerator and had the Log4j exploit on it. And they actually had to replace the refrigerator because there was no way to fix it. I'm like, so if you think you don't have Log4j, I'm pretty sure you do.
There's brick Rivian trucks out there I know of. So
it's a good parenting tip. Don't ever tell your kids not to do something. Or the reverse. Tell them to do it and they won't do it.
Yep. Tell them to, exactly. Like my 1.5-year-old, I tell her to do things. She's like,
Reverse psychology.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate you being on this podcast. We are about 17 minutes over past the hour that we have scheduled, so it means it was fun for everyone. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and I really appreciate it. And see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ron.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Hey, guys.